Hello and welcome to Love Work Life Training Academy Recruitment Training Webinar. I hope everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, just please drop a little line either in the chat box or in the Q&A section, just so I know that everyone can hear me. I hope everyone's well and everyone's having a good week. It's Wednesday, it's hump day, so let's try and get everyone over that hump and sort of really working well from there. There's lots of people attending today. Thank you, Michelle. So obviously going to hear me. Thank you, Sachin. Good to see you. Hope you're well. From there, it's been a really sort of busy week, as our attendees fly in. Give you an idea of some of the clients that are joining us today. So we've got Westray, TaylorMade, Impact, Vantage, Cherry, CKG, Search, Harper Evans, Pivotal, Amicus, Ignata, Cooper Lomax, TN Recruit, Alliance, SLR Solutions, FJ Wilson, The One Group, Athwell Resourcing, Bonbon, Aventus Legal, TaylorMade, Infor, Prosper, TTS 24/7, Star, JSR Recruit, Keenan, Riverside, and Hall Recruitment. And I think today's the first week that we've actually managed to make it, that we've got everyone from every part of the British Isles. So we've got Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland. So that's a good one. I know Ireland's not part of the UK, but it's a part of what we should be talking about, really. And so good to see there. Lots of people have also joined with Google, Gmails, iCloud, Outlooks, etc. So you're all welcome as well, but obviously I can't give you all the shout out. So lots of people still joining. So I'll give a couple of minutes for people to join in before I start really into the full process of taking the perfect job spec. And I think from my perspective, being a recruitment business sales manager, sales director, director of bigger businesses, etc., the one thing that I always found that when I started to investigate businesses and investigate people within those businesses, where the recruitment process fell down, it was the lack of a really good quality job spec. And the lack of that quality job spec really puts your recruitment efforts on the back foot. And I think what we've got to start to think about is when we start to take a job specification, it's what is that actually about? And I think a lot of people have a very differing view of what the job specification is truly about and what it actually leads to. So today I want to do that because I think this is the most important document in recruitment. And if we get that right, it will give you an absolute competitive edge over your competitors and give you a better placement, requirement to placement ratio, which is all about. So let me sort of kick in and look at the objectives that we are looking to cover today. So there's lots of things that we want to cover. We want to know your audience. Okay, planning part one. What if your client sends you a job spec? Planning part two, commitment, rules of qualification, the qualification process, know your client, candidate profiles and duties, compensation, the recruitment process, sell and agree your solution, and test your commitment. So an awful lot to go through. So if I'm going a little bit too quick, tell me to slow down. If you want to ask a question, please fire a question into the chat box or the question and answer box, and I'll pick it up. As I say, I'm usually on these webinars on myself on a Wednesday, so if I'm looking all around the screens from there, it's because I'm looking for everything that's on all the screens that's going on. So let's kick off with know your audience. So knowing your audience is really key to identify the job and what else do you need to identify. So having identified that's a job with a client, you need to establish really who in the company has the actual authority to recruit. And we always call this, although I think it's a bit sort of stated now, are you speaking to the man, the person with the money, the authority, and the actual need for that? Now, this could be anybody within the business. It could be a line manager. It could be the manager. It could be HR. You need to know who holds the ultimate power to recruitment and who can actually stop your recruiting. I think, it's possible to take an accurate spec from somebody and have a really good understanding of what the client actually wants, but that person might not actually be the ultimate decision maker and the person with all the responsibility. And therefore, sometimes we're working roles where we haven't spoken to the true decision maker and we don't know whether the role is actually signed off. So I think more now than ever, working requirement that has been authorized is absolute paramount. Working requirement that you don't know has been authorized is folly, because you might not get to the end of that. So you need to be speaking to the person who has the controlling power of the business to ensure you're working the role and you're not working for free with a zero chance of making a placement. It also gives you an opportunity, if you're talking to the ultimate power, to really spread your message across to the powerful people within the business to try and embed yourself more. So it's not just about the job specification at that stage. We then start to plan. And I always think planning is really important. But why should we plan before we actually start to make a call? You know, I always think before we make a call, you need to have a plan, a roadmap to get you from A to B, and you need to know what your route is. We need to really get ourselves in the right mindset to truly build rapport with our client. And I think in this moment in time, the market again is moving from that transactional recruiter where they just take a very scant job spec or take a job spec that's been given to them and not really do anything with it. As the market's changing and everyone's now getting more technology and using video, etc., it puts everyone on an equal playing field. So it revolves back to service. Service. So if we do the right things and we get the right service in place, that we need to make sure we're doing the right things. So you need to know your target company. You need to know who the target company is. You need to understand what that company does, know their skill sets. You need to look for common ground and know your product. You need to really make sure that you've planned a really good opening benefit statement before you get in. That first conversation that you have, that first comment you make to your client, is it going to be something that allows you to carry the call on and move the call further? All the other things are things that we should be prepping. You know, knowing your client, knowing the man, etc., are really things that we should be prepping beforehand to make sure we don't look stupid or feel foolish on the call. The big thing that I always look for is common ground. And I take common ground as a very, very high priority if you're trying to build relationship-based recruitment. And what I mean by common ground is look at what things that link you to your client, whether it be people that you know, people that they know, whether it be businesses that you're working with that they may have worked with in the past, etc., etc. All these things have common ground. I often describe this, especially when I'm sort of talking face-to-face and doing these training face-to-face, because we get a lot more interaction on a face-to-face basis. Here, obviously, I'm having to talk to people and I am not getting that interaction back. So when I say looking for common ground, what I mean is, if I think, remember when you go to the pub and a friend brings a friend in and you instantly either have a like for that person, not really bothered, or a dislike for that person. And you're probably not really interested in what they have to say. You're probably listening a little bit out of courtesy until they mention somebody that you know or something that you are really passionate about or involved in. Then all of a sudden, that common ground links you with that person and that conversation opens up so much more. LinkedIn now gives us a really good opportunity to see lots of common ground between ourselves and our clients that we can start to use to really help that conversation smooth out. A really easy icebreaker. So knowing common ground and how we can use that common ground is really important, especially when we're taking a job specification and we want to add conversational stories about other clients that we've worked with and been successful. If they are clients that they know, then they'll be more interested to listen to you. Or if they're clients that they respect, they will listen to how you've done that because it will help them with recruitment, because it means that you are becoming an influencer within the marketplace. So what if the client send you a job specification? And I think this is one thing that really sort of separates those out. And certainly when I've been mentoring clients and when I've been talking to their staff with regards to the issues that they have, a lot of the times when I start to look at what their requirement to placement ratio is, and I start to look at the job specifications that they're using, what I tend to find is those that have a very low transfer from job specification to actually placement, the reason why they have a low transfer from that one to the other is because they actually take the job specification that the client's given them and do nothing with that job specification. So we need to treat every job specification as if it is a new job, irrespective of whether you've worked that job before or you've just filled a job a couple of weeks ago. Something may have changed from there. So any job specification that we work, we need to go through the same process as if we'd never been given a job specification. So we have to speak to the client about the job. We have to expand the job specification. We've got to make sure that every time we speak to a client, that nothing has changed since last time we spoke to the client. And it's important that we all remember that. Those that separate themselves out in the recruitment market, to the elite recruiters, to the poor recruiters, this is one of the major things that separates them out. The elite recruiters in the marketplace spend an awful lot of time with their client, understanding the minute details of the job specification. And every minute detail gives them an extra edge, an extra opportunity to find the candidate by design and not by luck, which means they can go out and find a far better candidate with a quicker process than if you just take a generic job spec that a client's given you. I had one client that was really funny, one consultant that was really funny. They gave me a job specification and I just had a look at it and said, it's a Word document, isn't it? And they said, yes, it's a Word document. And I went onto the Word document and went into the back of the Word document. The document had been written almost 8 years ago. So that job spec hadn't changed for 8 years, but the world had moved massively on within 8 years. So think, a job specification that's been given to you by a client could be of a really vintage age and therefore not what they are truly looking for. So when we start to move into planning part 2, we've got to start to think about having a job specification sheet ready to fill in. And I always, job specification sheet is really important. And an acid test of having a job specification sheet ready, clear and to go, means I should be asking questions and know the questions I need to ask. I need to make sure that I fill every part of that job specification sheet in so there are no white spaces. And that's been religious about what I do with that job specification sheet. It means that being processed, that every time I speak to a client, I may have pre-filled that job specification sheet in on the knowledge I know, but I'll be highlighting things that I want to go back over constantly. I need to make sure that I've got a potential candidate in mind. So if I know the client, I know vaguely things about the client and what the client does, and I know their skill sets, then have I got candidates in mind already that could potentially fill this job? Because again, if I have, that means I can start to speak to those clients about the candidates that I have already. So I need to really have that in mind. Is this going to be a really hard job to fill? Am I going to be reinventing the wheel? Or is it going to be something that I should be in my sweet spot, and therefore I should have candidates already? I need to think about the clients that I'm going to speak to. I need to think about the questions they're going to ask me and the objections they're going to come up with. If I understand the objections they're going to come up with, then I'm already preparing myself for those objections. Then I'm already preloading my trigger when they come out with an objection that I can shoot back straight away with a perfect answer that will get me beyond that objection. So I've got to really start to think about these processes beforehand rather than going in cold and flying by the seat of my pants. I want to find out why the client is recruiting. So part of my planning stage is to look at my client and understand why that is. So it's a question that I will put into my recruitment process to ensure that I understand why they are recruiting, because there's very different reasons why our clients recruit that we can start to expand on, which we'll talk about a little later. I want to look to build a plan with my build the pain, with my client. I want to build the pain, and what I mean by that is what happens if they don't recruit? What happens if they don't get the right person? What happens from a timescale point of view? I want to build that because I want to be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses in the client's recruitment process. But I also want to find an emotional driver for the the client to use us, and for us as a recruiter to be able to play on that emotional process to drive our process in quicker and faster to ensure that we are the ones that get past the finish line. I want to extract more information. As I said, right from the start of this conversation, the more information I extract, the more edges I gain. The more edges I gain, the easier it is. And I remember talking about this in lots of different lights. I know when someone is more than likely going to play a placement. When I sit and evaluate the jobs that they've been working on, I can certainly go through and say, right, don't tell me which jobs you've placed. I'm just going to go through all the job specifications that you've got and all your information that you've got on the client. And as I'm going through the information, I can start to see where we have a competitive edge. I can start to see why we are better than other people and potentially what could that be. So I want to make sure that I've got more information, and that then goes back to our job specification sheet. Is that information on the job specification sheet? So I am absolutely certain to ask the questions every time. I want to have a drink ready. It's going to be a long call. It's quite interesting when I speak to consultants, you know, how long is the average call to take a job specification? And it's quite interesting. When I took the average of about 25 clients that were working for Love Work Life, it was quite interesting that it ranged from an hour to less than 10 minutes. So if you start to think about even the average time of their half an hour isn't a great deal of time to really understand your client and understand what your client is truly looking for. So you've got to make sure that you have an absolute understanding, and therefore be ready, have a drink ready, because you're going to be talking not a great deal in the first part of the call, but certainly in the second part of the call, you're going to be asking lots and lots of questions with regards to what the client is actually looking for. So you need to make sure that you're absolutely ready from there. We also need to make sure now that if we're doing any video, and we're going to be doing video for a long time with our clients due to social distancing, we need to make sure that our video is absolutely presentable. And what I mean by that is, have you done your hair? You know, are you presentable? I'm here in a jumper, but I'm not talking to a business. You know, have I it's quite interesting. I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago between 3 people, and we were talking about various different things. One of them was quite casually laid in bed watching the video, presenting on the webinar in bed. We've got to make sure that we ourselves are absolutely dressed properly for the webinar, and that's not in your PJs. I see TM Lewin is still shouting out about their shirts and selling 4 shirts for 40 quid. You know, TM Lewin are also selling pajamas. They've cottoned on that a lot of people are staying at home, but we've got to make sure that we are dressed to impress. And the last thing that we want to make sure that we've got really control of is the background, not just the background, the visual background, but also the noise in the background as well. And that comes on to a question that was asked yesterday, was headphones versus headsets. Headphones are the sort of things that you get in for your mobile phone, etc., that plug into your ears with a little microphone, etc. What they're very good at is they pick up lots of noise around you. And therefore what you find that your client at your other end gets quite a disturbed audio from there, so they can't really hear you. Where a headset, which I'm wearing now, a headset has a microphone, so I can speak directly into the microphone, and the microphone is directional at my mouth, so it's not picking up very much stuff from the outside. I'm also wearing a headset because now I can hear you guys properly, so I'd be able to hear my client properly talking to me, so I don't miss anything. Where I think sometimes on the headphones, they distort sometimes because they're pushed very hard into your ears, and sometimes your ears drums, when they vibrate, causes a little friction in there and you can't quite hear very well. So I'd always say a headset rather than headphones, because the audio is what really counts when we're talking to a client. We now need to sort of think about what we actually want to get from the client. Okay, what do we need to get from a commitment point of view when we first make that call? So what do you need the client to commit to when you first make the call to take a job specification? And this needs to be part of your plan before you get onto the call. We want to make sure that the client is giving us time to take a full job specification. You need time to build the spec out, to find everything you need. No matter how good the spec is, there's always more to learn. And if your client's not committed to you to spend time now so you can understand their role, why should you be committed to them? Because if you don't understand everything that you need, I can guarantee there's going to be an opportunity when they come back to you and say, well, they haven't got this skill, they haven't got that skill. And you'll be saying, well, that wasn't on the job specification when you first gave me it. But now they're looking for it because they didn't spend that time with you and you didn't demand that time to actually get the full job specification right from the get-go. Face-to-face meeting to take a job spec is obviously far better. We have an opportunity now, because of video technology, to go from taking job specifications over the phone to actually taking video job specifications. And this is where we can start to differentiate ourselves and differentiate with ourselves with our clients as well. So video can help us. If the client is good enough and the client is passionate enough about their business, would it be a good opportunity to ask the client whether or not we could video us taking the job specification, where you become almost a, I suppose, game show host, asking questions of your client, and your client's answering those questions, and you're bringing your audience into that marketplace. So if your client is really sellable and really passionate about the job, what a great way to actually bring a job spec to life by interviewing the client, bringing that job spec to life, putting it somewhere in a Dropbox so a candidate can access that, or sending it to a candidate so they can see the passion in the client, because people be people all the time. So it's really important that we start to think about expanding our service offering to our client, and can we play to the client's strengths as well as try and manage the client's weaknesses. We want a client who's going to welcome feedback on the position. After all, you are the expert. And it's very interesting when I speak to recruiters who fear giving feedback to clients because the clients will push back. But you've got to be certain about your marketplace and certain what's going on. So you should be able to give feedback on the position and be honest and tell them if the role isn't a role that they like to fill, you need to tell them that. They should welcome your feedback. If they're committed and trust you as a partner, they'll welcome your feedback to what's going on in the marketplace and what they're looking for and whether it is actually out there. They want to accept alternative suggestions about how they can recruit and what they can recruit on. And this is where data is really king. And by using that data, you can make it really important. But data is only good as the information that you can extract from that data. And that's what I call queen. And so if the queen provides you with an heir to the throne, it makes the king look good. So if your data is, you're able to extract that data and understand that, and then you can push that data to your client, and your client can understand that, then it will help to improve their recruitment process. It'll provide both parties with a valuable purpose of what's going on. So if you can tell the client how long it normally takes for them to go through the recruitment process, on average how many CVs it takes them, or on average how many interviews it takes them, you can start to point where the recruitment process is working, but more importantly, where it's falling down. And so by offering alternative suggestions and backing that up with data, there's more opportunity to improve the client's recruitment process, which will increase your opportunity to go from A to B and actually make a placement when it gets to the end. The next thing we've got to look at is they should only be receiving candidates that can actually do the role. And it's very interesting that you'll speak to lots of clients who take lots of candidates and waste lots of time looking at candidates that can't do the role. By ensuring that you have the best job spec humanly possible, you're saying that you are only submitting candidates that can actually do the role, which saves the client time and means they can spend more time doing what they're paid to do, which is actually their job. We need to make sure that we get commitment all the way through this process. And the biggest part to me commitment is to make sure that we are booking first and second interviews on that initial call, especially now when the market is really changing and the market is so different now with people sort of working from home, etc. Booking those calls will be really important because clients are getting inundated with Zoom meetings, inundated with calls, etc., constantly. So if we block those out in their diary right from the get-go, that means when we go to our candidate and talk to our candidate, we can gain commitment from our client, but also we can now start to specify to the candidate when they need to be available for interview. And that's really important. But it's not just the first interview. I'd always book the first and second at the same time, because that's demonstrating this commitment all the way through. We need to make sure not to compromise on the recruitment solution and the recruitment process. If you have a really good recruitment solution and a really good process, you need to challenge your client, and that leads back to data. And if we're challenging the client properly and we can push our understanding of the marketplace and prove by quantifiable means that our process actually works, then we start to gain more commitment from the client. And once we start to gain commitment and we start to influence the client, and the client can see the benefits of working within that way, then all of a sudden you start to create a partnership. And that takes it to a whole new level when you start to take a recruitment partnership and they start to take the suggestions and start to understand what you're talking about. It means that you are a trusted advisor to the client. And that is a very big step away from just being your bog standard chair filler in a recruitment organization. So we've got to make a difference now and really move from there. So I think there's certain rules to qualification that we need to follow. And the rules are very, very simple. If we want to follow the rules, we need to make sure that if the client sends a job specification, you still need to qualify it. Clients sometimes truly do not have a clue what they are looking for, and therefore we need to educate them. Clients tend to have a sort of rose-tinted glasses effect on what they're looking for. They tend to think, here's a person that's done a job that's just resigned. That person might have been with a client for 10, 15 years, and they may have actually amalgamated 3 or 4 jobs into one, but actually in the modern marketplace, that job doesn't exist. So we've got to make sure that we are truly understand what the client's looking for, and our client truly understands what they actually require, because sometimes what they need and what they actually want are very different things. So pushing back on the client constantly is this what you need or is this what you want, are very two different things, and trying to find that all the way through the process. By the end of the qualification process, you need to have a perfect job specification. If you haven't got a perfect job specification, how can you make a decision whether or not you work that job or not, or whether that job is worth investing your time on or not? And it's investing your time that's really important, especially if we're going to carry on doing contingency recruitment. That time you invest is free time until you make a placement. So you've got to understand what you're working on. So therefore, we've got to make sure by the end of the process, you have a perfect job specification that you think you've got an opportunity to actually make a placement from. As I said earlier on, we're going to make sure as a rule of qualification that when you've come off that, you have pre-booked your interview dates. I can't stress that enough. If you've pre-booked your interview date, you are massively increasing the commitment the client has with you and you have with the client. There is more skin in the game. So we need to make sure by that we've done that. We need to make sure that we've agreed terms and conditions and have them signed. Again, I speak to lots of consultants, and I'm sure there's quite a few people that maybe were on this call now that are working requirements from clients and they haven't got proper signed terms and conditions. You may have been working with this client for quite some time. Have you checked your CRM for terms and conditions being signed? There's an opportunity now to go back in this marketplace, have a good check, and then go away and say, just out of interest with the client, we haven't had signed terms and conditions. We need to upgrade our system. This is what we've been doing. Can I go back and do that? It's a great opportunity to make another call to your client and be there in your client's mind constantly with what's going on. You need to have a plan of action and have it confirmed with your client. You need to be able to make a decision once we've taken the job specification, either to work the job specification or walk away. Commitment is absolutely key. How fillable is the role is a real interesting question. How does the role fare against roles that you're already working on? Would you ditch it for another role? Do you actually have candidates already in your pipeline that can fill this role? Is this role in your sweet spot? What's the past history with the client? Has the client been a time waster in the past? Have they stopped returning your calls? Have they just dried up? Okay. Or are they a good client? Are you trying to convince yourself that this client has changed? Since COVID-19, they've changed their ways and therefore all of a sudden recruitment with them is going to be brilliant, where before it was a real pain. Remember, if you're going to try and convince the client to change, you've also got to convince yourself that they have changed. So sometimes you are the hardest person to convince. Oh, they've changed. So we've got to actually think about that. Have they truly changed? So we need to sort of think about putting blockers in place to make sure we're not working roles that are just wasting our time. So at the end of any qualification call, we need to be checking the rules of qualification and is this job fillable? Have you got everything that you need to fill this job? And sometimes that might mean asking other people to help you fill this job or help you understand whether or not you should be working the job in the first place. So let's move on to qualification and work on what we should be doing on qualification. So Do you have a process to qualify your client to ensure you optimize your opportunity to work the requirement? How many people have a job specification form ready and actually use it? It's really interesting. I go to speak to lots of clients. Some haven't got job specification forms, some have. I tend to find those that fill the job specification forms out have a better placement ratio. I tend to find those that still go by the seat of their pants and fill their own job specification form out without any format to it, again, have a little bit better qualification. Those that don't have a form whatsoever tend to miss an awful lot of information and are just happy they get a job. So having a job specification form ready before you take the qualification is really important. Taking the client details is really important. Again, how many clients do we see disappear? And we'll talk about this a little bit later in the recruitment process, because we've only got either an email address or a telephone number. We haven't got anything else for them. So it's really important that we have a process to make sure we capture all the client's details. We need to make sure that we've got a process that captures the candidate profile. What is the profile that the candidate wants? And generally what we have on any qualification form, and when I look at what consultants look for, the candidate profile is all skill-based. It's 90% skill-based and probably 10% behavioral-based. When in reality, we know that clients really hire on skills, but 90% of the time they fire on behaviors. So understanding the candidate profile is really, really important. And therefore we need to understand the roles and duties, the top 3 things that the candidate will be doing every single day in there. And we need to have a strong business process to work to and apply it. Because if we have a strong business process that we work to and apply it, then it's really important. If we understand what 3 things that our candidate's going to be doing every single day, rather than just what our client's telling us, then there's a very big chance that you're going to find a differentiation in between what the client actually wants and what they think they want and what they actually need. And it's understanding those things. And a lot of this sometimes feels like, when I go through this process with people with experience, it feels like to me that they feel like I'm teaching them to suck eggs. But when I actually sit down with them and go through their job specification and start highlighting things that they haven't done and look at what the requirements they've worked with in the past, in the last month, and what they haven't done, they start to identify the weaknesses that they thought they were doing because it is in their head that they're doing it, when actually in reality, when you put it down on a piece of paper, they are missing lots of things. So we need to know our client. We need to know our client, and we need to it sounds very simple that you need to know your client and you need to know what needs to go on, but it's a lot harder than you think. And irrespective of whether you've been working with the client for a period of time or not, you need to know about your client, and therefore you need to understand and know the company inside out. And it's really important that you understand the company inside out. You want to be able to match a candidate pool to that company. You want to make sure you've got that information in there. You need to make sure you've got market information about what's going on. And sometimes when I'm dealing with clients, I go away and speak to past employees of that client, so I can get a more rounded understanding. And that helps me when I come to recruit for those clients. As I said, I want to make sure I know the managers' names, number, mobile, landline, email address. Now I'm looking at WhatsApp. Have I got them on MS Teams? How can I get hold of that person? Because at the moment, the more we can communicate with our client, the better that is. I also want to know who else I can contact in case the client isn't there, especially now where people are working from home and working from different locations. And when we come out of lockdown, it will still be that way. There'll be a stepped implementation of coming back to work, and therefore people may be working from home for quite some time. So we've got to be able to manage these people and get them all together. So if our client is unavailable, who else can you speak to? And again, I sometimes find when clients go cold and you can speak to somebody else, you might find the reasons why it's gone cold. So why the manager works for the company. If I want my manager to sell the job specification to my candidate and get my candidate enthused about the job at interview stage, I want to understand the valuable insight my client can give me on why that person is working for the company. it will demonstrate a lot to you. It will demonstrate to them their passion for the company, but it will also demonstrate to you how they will sell the company to the candidate when the candidate gets into interview. So you might be sort of thinking what the client's saying to you. You might be thinking, actually, I'm going to have to educate the client now on how to sell the company to the candidate when they come to interview. Because quite often than not, when I'm speaking to candidates and getting feedback from candidates, they didn't really get a great feeling for the company from the person that they were being interviewed by. And I class this that sometimes the client will turn up for interview, but they won't be there actually in the room, not physically, mentally. They're mentally not attuned in to what that candidate needs. Or you get the other way where a client is so I'm so confident about my business that people will just buy my business because my business is named this, that, and the other. It's very interesting. I was speaking to a candidate in the tech market some time ago, and we were talking about IBM and talking about Apple. And he'd been for a role at both companies. And it was really funny. IBM gave them a reasonable sell on IBM of what's going on. Apple gave him an unbelievable sell, and he walked out of there as if he knew so much more about Apple than ever before, and he was so bought into the process with Apple, and he took that job even though IBM were paying significantly more money. It was all because of the way that the client had sold the company to him, and that was really important. And so I think in this day and age, as we move out of COVID-19 and out of lockdown, how a client sells a company to the candidates will be really important. So we need to understand that. The size of the company, turnover of the company, etc., again, is really, really straightforward. But how do you know? How often do you know the turnover of the company? How many sites, how many locations, the headcount? Because candidates want to know this type of information because they want to understand the size of the client's team. The permanent contract in that market is for you to sort of build an extra revenue stream, but they're looking at the size of the team because they want to know what opportunities then to grow within that company, career prospects within that company, promotion prospects within that company, etc. So all of these things have a real interest to the candidate, but we take for granted from the client, especially if we've been working with that client for quite some time. So we've got to make sure we do everything we can. We need to know why the job has come about. We talked about this before, about building pain for the client. So is the job a new job, i.e. it's been created because either the company's expanding, it's getting more work, or it needs new skills? Therefore, what would happen if they couldn't get that person in quick enough? Do they want to bring a new person with new skill sets in to help upskill other people within the business? So again, what's the knock-on effect of that? It could be that trying to deliver to a client, an outside client, and they're behind on timescales. Therefore, they might be bringing contractors in, they might be bringing perm people in. So we need to know why they are bringing people in, because it will have a knock-on effect on how that person who's doing the hiring may be perceived by their boss, perceived by their end client. It may be costing them money. So if we can understand the pressure and strain they're under, and we can start to try and relieve some of that pressure and strain, then all of a sudden we become a far more influential player within the marketplace. The last thing I always find, we need to find the number of positions that are actually open. How many times have I seen a candidate come back, a consultant come back to me and said, right, I've just made this placement, but he's told me there's 3 or 4 people going for, he's taking 3 or 4 people from other agencies. I didn't realize there was 3 or 4 jobs open, because we haven't asked enough questions. Excuse me. So onto the candidate profile and duties. How do you create desire and interest in the role? And I always think this is a very simple part of the process, but a part that's often overlooked. Okay, we need to know obviously the job title, the essential desirables and niche skill sets, the 3 things they're going to be working on every single day, the most important daily activity, and this might be very different to the skill sets that they're looking for. We need a full role description. I want to know the type of person they're looking for. And then we talk about the soft skills, the behavioral profile, team player, etc., etc., etc. And we talk about team size, we talk about promotional opportunities, and we talk about training. And they're the usual things that we go through when we talk about the duties of the candidate. But what we've got to start thinking about is what the candidate wants and what creates desire. So I always think of it, when I look at it from a candidate's point of view, if I was talking to a client, I want to know what is in it for me. Let's take money to one side, because I'm going to talk about money in a minute on the next slide. But what is in it for me? And if you can talk to a client, you can understand from a candidate's point of view what's in it for the client, what we'll start to create is what's called FOMO, fear of missing out. So if you have a really good essential profile and duties spec that really understands the what's in it for the candidate's point of view, you will start to create interest and desire for the candidate, because the candidate will fear they're missing something out if they've got a really good client to go and work for. It's a really good job to go work for. So understanding all those type of things is really important. So one of the things I usually ask a client is, tell me the best person in the company in this job at this moment in time and what they're doing. I sometimes ask, if I don't get a really good answer from my client, can I speak to that person? Because that person might give me more information that will help me round my job spec and understand more and more and more. So the more interest and desire I can create in this part, the more what's in it for the candidate, the more fear of missing out I'll create, which means money is also now an easier objection to overcome when we start to talk about money, if it's slightly less than the candidate was expecting, because it's about the job. Now you start to think about compensation, and we start to think about what candidates think now. If we went back 7 weeks, 8 weeks ago, what was important to the candidate now, and how how COVID has changed that, and how priorities have swung. Before, most would would say salary and rate, minimum expectations are really, really important. The maximum, the minimum is really important. They're probably interested in bonus schemes and commissions, how often it's paid out, what's it's doing. But now they might be more interested in what their holiday entitlement's like, what the pension plan is like, what the training is like. Is it flexible working? Have they got a car? And all these type of things now become more important to the candidate. That work-life balance is huge. Are they going to be able to work from home? What's their process, etc.? So many different things now have been brought in from COVID-19 that means that you can trade one thing for another. And we talked about this last week in negotiating. You can start trade one thing for the other. So we start to think about compensation now. We need to understand the whole package. And again, this is an area that I've often find myself talking to consultants about when they say, right, I'm going to speak to the client now about getting the offer because I need to understand the full compensation package. And I'm saying, what, you didn't understand that before? No, I've no idea what went before. So we need to understand the full package and what exactly you're selling to your candidate, and therefore what you can trade. And remember, priorities have really changed in 7 weeks from it being money to lots of different things. So what is it that you can use to really catch and drive the interest and desire of that candidate even more so once you've got the perfect profile? So now we start to talk about the recruitment process with our clients and how that recruitment process really works. So what do you need to know about the recruitment process? So I want to know what the client's current process is now. What's good and what's bad? And I always tell me what's good about your recruitment process, and they'll give me lots of things. And I always ask them, if you could change anything about your recruitment process, what would you change and why? Because I want to understand whether they've got areas that they think they can improve on and why they think they can improve on them. Because I may be able to add to that and maybe help them to improve. Some clients might, I don't really know, what are other people doing? And you can then start to give them ideas of what other people are doing that's been really successful that they're not doing. So you can start to then use your common bond, your common links coming in. Your competitor that's doing this, they're attracting people in this way. They're doing their recruitment process in this way. And therefore, they're getting through the recruitment process a lot quicker and getting a higher placement ratio than before. So using that type of information, again, using the data, will identify to the client that you are a true consultant, somebody who's worth speaking to, rather than what I said yesterday on a webinar yesterday, you are just a consultant that doesn't really know what they're talking about. We need to know what they've done to date, the number of agencies they've engaged in, the number of CVs they've received, the interviews they've undertaken, and why they have not been successful. We need to create urgency, but we also need to create realism with the client. And it's really important that we create urgency and realism with the client. If the client is looking for something that they cannot find, and I've spoken to consultants, they've just got a job on, I've got a great job on, and I'm going, great, what is it? This, and this. And I go, have you asked this question? No, go away and ask the question. And the client comes back to them and they say, right, what they've said is this. They've said they've had 20 CVs, they've had 15 interviews, they've been looking for the last 4 months and they haven't found anybody. Well, why are you going to be any different to those other agencies? What's going to make you different to find people? So you're now back on convincing the unconvinceables why they can't recruit, but you're convincing yourself that you're better than all those other agencies because they haven't been able to find it. There's a reason why they can't find those people. So you need to understand what they've done in the past, because that leads you to talk about their sourcing strategy and what you're going to do with regards to their sourcing strategy. And therefore, if they are not malleable with regards to their recruitment process, and they don't want to listen to you, the expert, the consultant in the marketplace, then you need to question whether you should be working the role or not. Are you flogging a dead horse or not? You need to think about the CV requirement and feedback dates that are set, because again, now we can start to really do different things with our CVs. I've been saying for quite some time that just sending CVs by email is really quite an awful way of representing a candidate to your client. It's also an easy way for a client to hide behind that. But if you're setting up video conferences with your client to go through CVs, but you're sending CVs in video format to your client, and you're then giving a call into the client through Zoom or whatever it be to talk over those videos, then all of a sudden you've got a whole different kettle of fish. A client might not be sure about the candidate. If you've spoken to the candidate and have the candidate already lined up before the interview process, that the client might come back and ask questions, you could connect the client there and then to your candidate via video and introduce them and get them to speak about that process before even setting up the interview. So again, it gives a very high touch point personal service that's very different to what we've done before. I have certain clients that in certain marketplaces can and should be doing this already. If you're a very, very transactional temp or contract recruiter, and you've got clients that take temps and contracts on constantly, why aren't we lining up lots and lots of candidates that are really good for the role, telling them that we are going to meet with the client at whatever time it is you're going to meet with the client, therefore they need to make themselves available for interview. We could then either meet the client face-to-face or connect via video. And if we're face-to-face, we can connect our systems via their internet and their Wi-Fi. And we can instantly say, right, here are 4 candidates that are really good for the job. They can pick what they believe is the best and interview the candidate instantly, there and then on the call, there and then in the face-to-face meeting. Again, saving a massive amount of time, but using data. So we're helping change the recruitment process and drive that recruitment process. So interview dates are really, really important. That interview process is really important, because if we understand the number of interviews they have to take to make a placement, we need to understand why it's either a winning formula and carry on, what can we then sell to other clients and use from that winning formula, or why it's not a winning formula, what do we have to change? So what questions do they ask? Who are they asking? So that feedback process then becomes so important to what we do, as does the offer and the counter offer. And I think in this marketplace, the offer and counter offer now is going to be the most critical part of the recruitment process, if it wasn't already, mainly because more candidates are going to get counter offered than ever before. There's going to be a high demand for candidates in certain areas, so they're going to get more offers. So we need to control this process. So we need to make sure the client understands this really well, so we can make him move or her move quickly through the process. I read a LinkedIn post today about a candidate and a client, and the candidate was submitted to the client 5 weeks ago. The client said he was really, really good, wants to make an interview. He's come back 5 weeks later. The candidate is now ghosting the agency, and I can understand why the candidate is ghosting the agency, mainly because the agency probably wasn't in touch with the candidate in those 5 weeks, And because the client has taken so long to come back, why would I want to work with a client like that? So we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things constantly with our candidate and our client all the way through. We need to know what the what if, the implications if of not recruiting. If we know the implications of not recruiting, then we can create more pain for the client and more desire to buy the right candidate when we put the right candidate in front of that person. But if we're looking for that purple unicorn, we need to know what we can trade. We need to make sure that we can do things. Once we get to the end of the process, we need to make sure that we can sell and agree a solution. And selling, agreeing a solution is really important. Even if you've got processes already in place and you've got terms and conditions already in place, we still need to agree the proposition of your solution. So you need to have all the facts and give feedback on the client's issues and needs. If you're going to take a job on, you need to be really, really certain that you can fill the job. So you need to suggest changes in the recruitment strategy where possible. You need to propose a full service starting with retained, then exclusive, then contingency. If it's a big opportunity where they're looking for multiple people, can you create a really different type of retained service where they're going to pay you just a retainer each month to find these people? But whatever you propose, once you propose your service to them whilst taking the job specification, once you propose your full fee, you need to shut up. You need to be really, really quiet and let them think about the situation. So propose your service, let them think about the service. Once they come up, give them the fee and then be quiet. If they have to trade variables, then you can trade them one at a time. If you have candidates now that are right, now's the time to present those candidates. You now need to reconfirm your interview dates, recap the compensation package, and reconfirm the whole process. So once we know what that process is, we're committing them to stand by that process and work on the process that we've given them, including all the milestones that they must achieve all the way through that. So we need to set actions, and I would always agree all actions in writing. And so to test our commitment before we disappear off the phone, we need to test our commitment very positively. We need to make sure that we are doing what we think we should be doing right. So once we've got all the job specification right and we've talked to the client, I would stop, think, and breathe, or stop, breathe, and think, depending which way you've written it. Okay? You need to have full commitment. So do you have full commitment? Do you feel that once you've put the phone down that you can walk away and fill that role? That role is absolutely fillable. You need to have that gut reaction that you've got a real excitement when you come off the phone. So can you fill the role? I always say, is the role a grade 8 or not? We should be grading every single job specification we take on. And I use the following specification grades for mine. So a 10 grade is a retained job, fully committed by the client, and it's fillable. I don't take a role on a retainer if I can't fill the role. So if I can't fill the role, I wouldn't put myself in a situation where I've got a retainer, a third up front, or I'm taking a monthly fee to fill roles if I don't think I can fill the role. So I have to have full commitment from myself and from the client if I'm giving a retained role. And that's the best role to work because I've got money up front and I'm working from there. The next role, it's exclusive, it's fully committed by the client, and it's fillable. A number 8 is exclusive, but it lacks commitment, or you're not sure about the commitment, or you're not sure about your candidate base from there. Then we start to get to 7, okay? And how many people are working roles like this? It's a contingency role, you've got commitment, it's fillable, and there's less four competitors on there. So it's a good role. But what do I need to do to that role to convert that role into exclusive, where you've got commitment, or you've got candidates that can fill that role, but you maybe lack a little bit of commitment? It's a far better opportunity if it's exclusive. A number 6 role is you've got contingency, but it lacks either commitment or you're not sure whether you can actually fill the role because you haven't got a candidate base. and it's got less than 4 competitors. And it goes down and down and down to one where you're basically scraping a job board off a job board. You've sent a speculative CV, but you think you're going to get a placement because you've got a CV and a client's got, oh, that candidate looks good. So you've got to grade your roles, because if you do that every single time, then you only start to work roles that you know you've got a high percentage chance of filling. If you're hiding behind roles when you start to grade those roles, then all of a sudden you realize you're wasting away, as Pink Floyd said, you're wasting away the moments that make up a dull day, because it becomes a very dull day because you know deep down you're never going to fill that role and you're trying really hard, but really what you're doing is you're hiding. And if you're hiding, you're never going to make a placement. So we're going to make sure that we do the right things constantly on that. Okay. Are you confident in your proposal? So when you propose to a client your fees, are you confident? Confident is bred by you feel that you've got commitment all the way through and the client is really engaged by your process. So again, if you've given a fee and you're not committed to that, then it's really, really sort of interesting. Your gut inside is telling you something, and you need to explore that and you need to nail that down, because if you carry on working a role and all of a sudden that gut instinct comes back, oh, I knew the client wasn't committed, or I knew I couldn't find these type of people, then you knew that right from the start because your gut was telling you, but you didn't have the gumption and you didn't have the balls, I suppose, to actually go away and challenge yourself. You just took the role because you wanted to fill a KPI. That's not the way to work. And certainly in the future, it will not be the way to work. So you need to, can you and will you be able to fill it? If you have any doubts, you need to seek a second opinion. And a second opinion will be really honest, because they will tell you honestly whether or not you think you're wasting your time or not. So always seek a second opinion if you've got any doubts whatsoever before you start working a role. And at some places at this moment in time, I'll be seeking opinion all the time about whether or not I'm going to fill that role, because I don't want to waste my time working roles that I'm never going to fill. So taking a job spec isn't just the function of writing out a job spec and what the client requires. It's understanding the full process and understanding what the client needs to make sure that you are engaging fully and that you have a candidate base. So to conclude, you need to know your audience, you need to know your man. You have a plan. You know what to do if your client sends you a job specification. You know what commitment looks like. You know what to ask for when taking a job spec. You know the rules of qualification. Well, if you know what you're asking for in a job spec, then you know what the client needs from the client, the role, the candidate, and the compensation. You know all those 4 areas inside out. And that is a long conversation, a long, long conversation. You've agreed the recruitment process, and you've sold and agreed your solutions. And you can gauge if you can and will fill the role. You are now set to work the requirement, but only if you feel that you can actually fill the role. Only if you think there's an opportunity to do that would I ever work a requirement. I was very pointed about what I did. I would never invest my time on anything that I didn't think I could fill. I would never waste my time because I didn't see any point. Time was too precious. I was always in competition with myself, and I always created a nemesis of someone I was competing against to ensure that I kept myself honest, that I didn't just idly think, well, I've got a role there, it's hit my KPIs, I can put it through from there, that's not a problem. I was very open and honest from there. So I only worked requirements that I thought I could fill. And if I had any doubt about that, I would ask. So that is the main part of taking a job specification. An anonymous attendee has asked, what are the main objections that you come across? The main objections that I come across are clients, because they don't believe in your process and they don't really buy into you, pushing back on your recruitment process. Or when you challenge the client about their recruitment process, they refuse to budge. Although it's not a genuine objection, it is an objection to their I suppose, commitment to you. So you need to make sure you push across that. If you really dig inside the client's mind and understand what's going on, and they dig inside the company and understand what's going on, the objections that you'll get when you come towards the end of the sale are easier to overcome. If you pitch your service, as we talked about last week, in singles, so this is what we do for a contingent recruitment, this is exclusive recruitment, this is retained recruitment, and this is a recruitment service. And we get the client to decide which is right for them, and we then pitch our role and pitch our fee, then all of a sudden you get an easier opportunity to overcome any objections. The objections that we tend to have is, I haven't got time to do that, it must go through HR, etc. All these objections you can overcome if you have the commitment of the client and you can fill the jobs, because the client and the person that is your sponsor within the business, and if your sponsor is the main person in the business, then they will drive that change through the business if they believe that you are a true partner within the business. And that means that you have to be able to influence your marketplace massively. Sharon's just asked, what's the best way to say to a client that you are not going to work a role? For example, if it's a poor job specification or not attractive job specification. Sharon, that's a great question. And it's a question that I have had thrown at me by lots and lots of clients and by lots of consultants. You need to close it down in a very professional way, in a very professional manner. And I'd always explain to the client why I wasn't working the role. I was on a client meeting with a consultant, and the consultant was, I fair say, was shocked at a comment that I said to a client. The client was objecting to us pushing for exclusivity and was really driving exclusivity. Yeah, I don't want that at all. And the role that he was looking for was a 100K plus role. We wanted it exclusively, and he just wasn't having any of it. And I turned around, and being honest and open to the client won the day. And I turned around and I said, Mr. Client, do you understand? Can you tell me why you want to have 4 agencies working on this role? And his answer was competition, puts you all in competition. It's a better spread of the marketplace. I can ensure then that I have got all the candidates across the marketplace. And I turned around and said, do you understand, Mr. Client, what happens in an agency when we are working a role such as this? And he says, yes, you get very competitive because you want to beat your competition. I said, well, actually, it's the complete opposite to that, Mr. Client. If I know that I've got 4 competing agencies and I'm working a role, and then someone came to me and gave me a role that was worth 25 grand, but they gave me exclusively, or a 30 grand role and they gave me a retainer on that role, I would drop your role instantly and work those 2 roles. Why? Because it's a success-based industry, and therefore I'm not going to get paid if I don't fill your role. So I've only got a 25% chance at this moment in time, and you're making me rush the role, so you're not going to get the best candidates. If you give me that role exclusively, so I know I'm not in competition, I've got more opportunity to look at the marketplace and go through the marketplace. And I can therefore find the right candidates and get you a better candidate, which means your recruitment process is shorter because you're not interviewing loads of candidates that aren't worth your time, and therefore you can focus on your job. And they were really sort of shocked by that. And he said, really? I said, that's absolutely what happened. We took the job on exclusively and we filled the job. And he was really sort of pleased in that sort of fashion. So I would always explain why. If the role is a role that isn't going to be found, I'd explain why. And I'd let the client down gently, and I'd arrange a call back in a certain number of periods of time. I wouldn't just say, oh, I'm not going to work that role. I'd give them a full explanation why I'm not going to work that role and what the benefit of changing the role would be and mean to the client in the long term. So it's really important that you're very open and honest with the client, because the client will respect that. What they normally get is an agency saying, I can fill that, I can fill that, I can fill that. And yet you're saying, well, they've also, they can fill it, but you're still talking to me, and it's 3 weeks later and you haven't filled it. You haven't got CVs. There is an issue there. So being open and honest with the client is really important. Lauren's just asked, I don't know, my screen's just gone black. Lauren's just asked, how can you work out specifically you are going to fill it. I talk to clients who have committed their roles and been filled in general, but sometimes they just say they're exclusive with me, but it turns out not. Sometimes they're using agencies as backup, etc. Okay, so that's the things that happen quite a lot, Lauren. Certainly when you're sort of new working with a client, or they give you their, generally it's because either they are getting lots of calls from lots of agencies and they're not confident in your process, or they don't quite understand your process, or they are just feeding you a line. And once I start to see other agencies working roles, I want to know why they're working roles. And to give you an example of that, we had a client where we were doing behavioral recruitment for them. We were doing a high-end role for them, and we'd explained to the client fully our recruitment process. And we said it normally takes about a week to 10 days to get CV shortlist to you with a full behavioral profile. And we came back to the client after 8 days and said, look, we've got the full process for you. We've got 4 candidates we just about to do. He said, oh, I've already set interviews up. And we said, oh, right, what, I thought we were working exclusive with you. You were, but I got a bit panicky because I hadn't seen CVs. And we said, we explained it would take 10 days. Oh, I forgot about that. So the client was at fault. So we said, right, we've got these 4 candidates. So we sent the 4 candidates in. The client then looked at the candidates that had been sent through the other agencies and our candidates. So he ended up doing 7 interviews. When he came back to us after doing 4 interviews with us and 3 from the other agencies, he said, oh my God, the difference in your 4 CVs compared to everybody else's was huge. They pushed the first CV past the post. Your candidates are all absolutely perfect for the role. There's a huge difference because we had the time and the opportunity to go out and behaviorally test the candidates against what the client required and did that. So sometimes it's the client that is at fault because they feel that they don't understand what's going on because their norm is just speed, 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 speed. So you've got to really sell your process to the client, and the client's got to genuinely trust you. But it's also about keeping in constant contact with the client all the way through the process and telling them where you are. So dropping an email, having a conversation with them about what's going on. So having almost a daily catch up as they would have with their team, because that's really what you want to become. You want to become part of their inverted commas team. So you'd have a daily catch up with them. So some of the best clients I worked with, I would have when I was working roles, almost a daily catch up with them constantly to where I am. So if we had to change some things, we could change it on the fly and work that way. So sometimes it's a mixture of you and the client, and you've got to make sure you get everything across as it should be to the client. Has anybody else got any other questions? I hope that answered everyone's questions that they've got. Guys, I'd like to thank you very much again for another webinar. I really love doing the webinars. I hope you're enjoying them too. We will be again next week. So there's one again on Tuesday for all managers of recruitment. There'll be another one on Wednesday for recruitment training. If you have any topics, please drop me a line. If you've got any comments, please drop me a line. You should get an email after this from, I think it's MailChimp with a survey on. If you could fill that survey out, it'd be much appreciated. It gives us great information that we can sort of use. So all that leaves me to say is I hope you stay fit and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated.